Donald Trump didn't cancel a trip to Milan because of diplomacy or security intelligence or some urgent national emergency. He canceled because he was terrified of being booed. Let that sink in. The President of the United States, this self-proclaimed strongman, this chest-thumping brand of toughness, looked at a stadium crowd and thought, what if they humiliate me? And instead of showing up like an adult, he stayed home. He was supposed to go watch a gold medal hockey matchup between the United States and Canada at the Winter Olympics. A moment that should have been simple. Show up, be normal, support the athletes, smile for the cameras, leave. But Trump didn't want to walk into the wrath of the world. That's the phrase that keeps echoing in your mind because it describes exactly what's happening to him internationally. He's becoming the face of American embarrassment. And if you want proof that it wasn't a paranoid fantasy, you don't even need to squint. Milan is already seeing protests and carnival scenes with Trump floats, giant caricatures of him rolling through parades like he's a punchline in papier-mâché form. That's what he couldn't handle. Not policy critique, not a hard question, a crowd reacting honestly, a chorus of boos he can't sue, can't bully, can't fire, can't truth social into silence. So what does he do instead of facing the world? He hosts a Governors Association meeting at the White House, except he only invites Republican governors. That's the move. That's the tell. He turns a national institution into a partisan clubhouse because he can't stand being in the same room as Americans who didn't vote for him. He treats democracy like a private fan convention where the only acceptable people are the ones who clap on cue. And at that meeting, he gives what can only be described as an unhinged speech, one where he's not governing, not solving problems, not addressing the reality people are living. He's doing Trump, rambling, boasting, performing grievances, and in the middle of it all, fixating on the kind of thing that tells you what actually matters to him. Not health care, not wages, not national security, a ballroom, a golden ballroom. The kind of gaudy, gilded monument to ego he can point at and say, look what I built, like the White House is a hotel lobby he owns. He talks about it like it's been a 150-year tragedy that there wasn't a great ballroom. And now, thank God, Trump is here to save America from the nightmare of a modest reception room. He says it'll be the greatest ballroom anywhere in the world, like he's narrating a real estate brochure while people can't afford doctor appointments. That's the contrast that defines this presidency. Americans rationing health care while Trump daydreams about gold curtains. And before we get to the health care part, because it matters, let's talk about the most spiritually grotesque hustle of this entire episode. Trump signing holy Bibles with his own name on them. The Trump Holy Bible sold for something like $65, signed like it's a collectible baseball. A sacred text turned into merch, religion turned into branding, faith turned into a receipt. The image is almost too perfect. A man who dodged Milan because he feared boos, sitting in the White House signing Bibles like a celebrity at a mall kiosk. And the celebrity echo chamber even catches it. Nicki Minaj posting that she got a signed Holy Bible with Donald Trump's name on it. This is where we are as a country. The president skipping international events out of fear while selling autographed scripture to feed the cult economy. Now, right around the same time, Trump posts something else that captures the larger sickness. He claims he's working with the fantastic governor of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, to send a great hospital boat to Greenland to take care of many people who are sick. He posts it like a heroic humanitarian mission. He adds the little DJT flourish, as if the world is supposed to applaud his generosity. Except it's nonsense. Greenland has universal health care. Greenland doesn't need America's hospital ships to rescue it from imaginary suffering. And even worse, Trump uses an image as if this ship is on the way, when the reality is that the U.S. Navy's hospital ships are reportedly undergoing repairs at a shipyard in Mobile, Alabama. In other words, Trump is posting a fantasy, a fake humanitarian rescue to a place that isn't asking for it, while the equipment he's invoking isn't even available the way he's implying. And here's the cruelty. While he's posting hospital ships for Greenland, he's ripping healthcare away from Americans at home. That's the center of gravity of this story. Trump wants to look like a savior abroad while creating desperation at home. The result is a kind of moral inversion that should disgust anyone with a functioning conscience. Because right now, millions of Americans are skipping doctor appointments, not because they don't believe in medicine, but because they can't afford it. They're praying they don't get sick. They're hoping they don't die because the bills could destroy them. Trump's answer isn't to restore stability, strengthen coverage, protect families. His answer is to post hospital ships for Greenland. And then he pretends we're the idiots for noticing the contradiction. That hypocrisy becomes even sharper when you look at the timing games being described around Medicaid and Medicare. The idea that cuts kick in after the midterms isn't subtle politics, it's cynical deception. It's the political equivalent of hiding the bill until after you've collected the votes, because you think the public is too stupid to connect cause and effect. And Trump's circle keeps leaning into this. Lots of spectacle now, lots of pain later, and a demand that you praise them for it. Meanwhile, the international part of the story gets uglier, because Trump's fear of being booed in Milan isn't just about vibes, it's about what he's doing to America's alliances. Europe is pivoting toward buy Europe first defense procurement precisely because Trump has trashed Europe, threatened trade wars, and treated allied security like a hostage situation. When you tell partners they're too dependent, mock them, threaten them, and then even float fantasies about invading territory linked to a European country, you don't get to act shocked when they decide to build their own defense industrial base without you. Then, in the most arrogant move imaginable, Trump's U.S. ambassador to the EU sends a message opposing any European preference in the EU Defense Procurement Directive, basically telling Europe, sure, rearm, but you still need to buy American. After you insult them, after you threaten them, after you launch economic pressure, after you destabilize the alliance. The audacity is almost breathtaking. We'll treat you like trash, but you still owe us your defense contracts. That is not diplomacy. That is extortion with a flag. And while Trump is alienating allies, his foreign policy messaging veers into something darker, praising Vladimir Putin as straight with him, repeating the fantasy that Putin has red lines you can respect and negotiate with while Russian strikes hit Ukraine anyway. The reality intrudes: drone and missile strikes, attacks in multiple regions, with air raid alerts spreading. Even when Ukraine gains territory in counteroffensives, the danger remains constant. And what does Trump's orbit do? It keeps selling the soft focus idea that you can deal with Putin if you just treat him like a misunderstood business partner. That's the kind of thinking that gets people killed. Then comes the most alarming kind of cross-current: money and Russia. The story being discussed involves a figure described as Donald Trump Jr.'s college roommate, Gentry Beach, reportedly in talks involving a major stake connected to a Russian Arctic gas project in Alaska, with an agreement involving the Russian company Novatek signed in the fall of 2025. You don't need to be a spy novelist to understand why that stinks. At a moment when the world is trying to contain Russian aggression, we're hearing about the Trump-adjacent donor universe engaging in deals that look like normalization by cash flow. And this is how democracies get compromised, not always with dramatic treason, but with business incentives that warp national interest into private interest. Back at home, Trump's brain keeps bouncing between petty vanity and propaganda. At the governor's meeting, he calls Melania his movie star wife, and then does the most revealing little bit of psychological projection. He says the governors and cabinet secretaries look in the mirror and think, I should be president, not him. He frames it as a joke, but you can hear the insecurity. He knows his own people are ambitious. He knows his coalition is held together by fear and transaction, not respect. He knows loyalty is rented, not earned. Then he tries to talk about Pete Hegseth. He can barely get the sentence out, calling him a great leader, an inspiration to the military. And you can hear the mushy, incoherent, self-satisfied ramble of a man who thinks saying great enough times equals reality. And then this is important, you get the polling comparisons that underline why Trump is so terrified of being booed in Milan. People are increasingly willing to say out loud that others did the job better. You see the comparisons: Obama versus Trump, Biden versus Trump. The exact numbers aren't the point as much as the direction. The myth of Trump competence is collapsing even in the realm of perception, which is usually where he lives. That's why the Epstein and Maxwell thread keeps creeping into the conversation, too. Maxwell is described as filing to block tens of thousands of documents, deposition, transcripts, witness statements from being produced, claiming privacy. The story being pushed is that she's playing the role Trump wants her to play, and that her transfer to a minimum security club-fed environment is part of the same broader ecosystem of shielding and delay. Now, separate the rhetoric from what's undeniable. When the public believes that evidence is being delayed, blocked, or curated, especially around elite wrongdoing, trust collapses. And Trump's response is always to call it a hoax and move on. In fact, the fundraising email described captures the rot perfectly. Trump sends supporters a jackpot-style message. You've won, Mega Millions Club, claim your spot. And then right in the middle of the emotional manipulation, he calls it the Epstein hoax. That's the trick. Branded a hoax, then ask for money. It's grievance monetization. It's manipulation as a business model. And as if the hypocrisy weren't already rich enough, J.D. Vance goes on friendly media and claims Democrats are making it their cause of the day to let violent sex offenders stay on the streets. That's the line. That's the attack. But think about what the Trump world is doing in parallel, screaming, protect the kids, while the Epstein conversation burns through the public consciousness, demanding moral panic about crime while selling Epstein hoax fundraising emails, pretending they're the guardians of decency while turning religion into merch and government into a stage for gold curtain fantasies. It's not just hypocrisy, it's an inversion of morality designed to confuse people into obedience. And then the international humiliation returns. Trump didn't go to Milan because he feared booze, he feared protests, he feared being embarrassed on camera. That's why he stayed home to sign Bibles, talk ballrooms, and post fake hospital ship heroics, because at home, he can control the room. He can invite only Republicans. He can stage the applause, he can avoid dissent, he can live in the bubble, but the world is not his bubble. And the moment he steps outside, people react like free people react. They boo, they protest, they mock, they hold up floats, they reject the strongman act. So what you're watching is a presidency shrinking into itself, less governing, more branding, less leadership, more merch, less diplomacy, more extortion, less truth, more performance. And the reason that matters isn't because it's embarrassing, though it is. It matters because a shrinking presidency becomes a more dangerous one. When Trump can't win respect, he reaches for coercion. When he can't earn legitimacy, he demands loyalty rituals. When he can't handle scrutiny, he calls it a hoax and cashes the check. He didn't cancel Milan because he's busy. He canceled because he's afraid. And if the president of the United States is afraid of booze, imagine what he'll do to avoid accountability